So, it feels like almost everyone is pretty bearish on Bitcoin these days, right? But what's really fascinating is that some major companies are doing the exact opposite. They're doubling, even tripling down. Today, we're going to unpack the bold and, let's be honest, often controversial world of corporate Bitcoin strategy to really understand the philosophy behind these massive, massive bets.
Okay, to really wrap your head around the scale we're talking about, just look at this number, 672,497. That is the absolutely staggering amount of Bitcoin held by just one company, MicroStrategy. At today's prices, that's a commitment of over $50 billion.
But, and this is the key, this isn't just some simple line item on a balance sheet. No, it's a deeply held corporate strategy, and it's a philosophy about the entire future of money itself. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the what, the why, and the absolutely huge vision that's driving all of this.
All right, first up, let's take a look at who is actually buying and just how much they're stacking up. I think some of these numbers might actually surprise you.
I mean, just look at the relentless pace of this. MicroStrategy, you can see, recently scooped up another 1,229 Bitcoin. But check out Metaplanet, that's a Japanese company. They just made an even bigger purchase of over 4,200 BTC. It's clear they are both aggressively adding to their already huge piles.
This chart really puts the scale of MicroStrategy's position into perspective, doesn't it? They hold almost double the amount of Bitcoin as all other corporate treasuries combined. Some analysts are calling this a moat, basically a defensive barrier that makes their position just incredibly dominant and unique.
Okay, so this begs the question, right? Why are they buying so aggressively right now in a market that feels, well, anything but bullish? Let's take a look at the broader feeling out there.
You know, if you scroll through social media, you see this kind of sentiment everywhere. This quote really nails the mood. People feel disillusioned. Bitcoin is underperforming everything else, and all the attention is shifted over to AI, silver, and gold.
But then you get the complete opposite take. This is the classic contrarian investor thesis. The fact that everybody's feeling negative isn't seen as a warning sign, it's seen as an incredible opportunity. The philosophy is super simple. You buy when there's fear in the streets.
And that mindset, that idea of questioning the crowd, it's perfectly summed up by this old quote from Mark Twain. For these corporate buyers, all this widespread negativity isn't a red flag at all. It's actually a signal to pause and reflect, and to seriously ask if maybe, just maybe, the majority is wrong. So we've covered the what, who's buying and how much. But now let's get into the really interesting part, the deep why. This brings us right to the core philosophy of Michael Saylor, the CEO of MicroStrategy, and his views on how Bitcoin should, or maybe more importantly, how it shouldn't, evolve. You know, there's this huge debate that's always happening inside the Bitcoin community, and it really boils down to this one central question. There are constant proposals to improve Bitcoin, to add new features, to change the way it works. So what's Saylor's take on all this?
Well, his answer is pretty direct and incredibly powerful. For Saylor, Bitcoin's stability, its resistance to change, is its single greatest strength. Think about it. In a world where every piece of software is constantly updating, Bitcoin's unchanging nature is what gives it trust and value. It's the feature, not the bug.
So his argument is to be hyper-conservative. What does that mean? Basically, don't mess with the network's core rules, its protocol. The whole idea is that any proposed change, no matter how tiny, should be slowed way, way down, and only ever happen if there's overwhelming, almost unanimous global agreement. The number one goal is to protect the protocol above all else.
And this super conservative philosophy, it's not just about code. It extends into a much, much grander vision. The idea that Bitcoin isn't just money, it's an entirely new form of property.
Here's the key concept. Saylor sees Bitcoin as the invention of true digital property rights. For the first time in history, there's a mathematical protocol that lets you hold and control your own economic energy, your own value, without needing permission from any bank, any government, anyone.
And because of that, he argues that nobody should actually fear it. Just like we don't fear fundamental things like fire or math or electricity, he believes these groups should see Bitcoin as a profoundly useful tool, a kind of humanitarian and egalitarian revolution that can actually benefit everyone.
Okay, and that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. And honestly, this might be the most audacious part of the whole vision. The idea that Bitcoin doesn't just participate in our economic system, it fundamentally transforms the entire field of economics itself.
What this slide shows is a pretty radical shift in thinking. The argument goes like this. Before Bitcoin, economics was more of an art, right? A soft science, filled with superstition, politics, and a ton of human bias. But with Bitcoin, which is a system based on a pure mathematical protocol, the belief is that economics can finally become a true engineering discipline, a hard science.
And that all leads to this. This is the ultimate claim. In this view, Bitcoin isn't just a new asset or some new technology. It is, potentially, the single biggest engineering breakthrough in the entire history of economics.
So that leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? Are these massive corporate bets just a high-stakes gamble on a really volatile asset? Or are we witnessing the very early stages of a fundamental rewiring of our economic world, transforming it from an art into a science? The answer to that question is going to define the next few decades.